All right. Well, we're at the top of the hour, so I think it's time to go get started. First of all, Happy New Year, everyone. I know we're about 2 weeks into the new year, but this is our first webinar of 2024. So thanks for joining us. I know some of you guys have been to our current or our past webinars, so welcome back. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. Today, we're joined by Mandy, who is our usual host for Zoho Skillup sessions. And as is the tradition with Zoho Skillup sessions, these are a 30-minute deep dive into something very, very specific. And in this case, it's going to be all about deploying and managing automated workflows in Zoho CRM. So at the end of the webinar, Mandy will have about 20-25 minutes of content, then we'll save a little bit of time for Q&A. And if there's any further questions, I'll have some instructions for you after the webinar, including a few different links that I'll have you check out. One is to book a call with your account manager. One is if you want to save a place at Zoholics, which is obviously our big annual user event. And the last will be for a little survey at the end, just to help us curate the type of content that is useful for you. So without further ado, let's jump into the content, and I will turn it over to Mandy. Happy New Year, Mandy. Oh, Mandy, we cannot hear you. I think you're on mute still.
I was on mute and now I should be coming through loud and clear. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can get started. All right. So we are going to talk about workflows today. Super exciting. I think the number one topic that I hear when I talk to customers, and I work primarily with enterprise customers, the number one thing that they're always wanting to know is very simple. How can I automate as much as I can so that my sales team has more time to be doing the things that they need to do, right? To be making phone calls and reaching out to customers. So we want to automate as much as we can. And automation can help definitely in just cutting down on some of the manual processes that your team follows, but it can also help with a lot of other areas like data transfer and just making things really simple. So what we're going to do in this session is we're going to talk about workflows, how to build out workflows. If you are familiar with workflows already, then this might be one of those things if you're like, oh, I know how to do that. We have made some changes into the workflow builder. So I think it's good to kind of have that nice crash course and see what all is included. But definitely for the folks that are shaky or new to workflows, I think that this will be really helpful. We're just going to kind of walk through all of the pieces and the fun things that you can do with them. And we'll talk about some examples too. So all of your workflows are going to be controlled when we are in the CRM in our setup menu. And then when you go under the automation section for workflows, and you'll see I've got a bunch created in here. When you create workflows, this is always helpful. You can search and find them. I see a lot of people who are trying to find the right workflow, and I also see a lot of Control F and they search. This little search window is there, and you can always use this to quickly just search and find quick workflows, things like that. So I always like to bring that up. That's there. And then the module filtering as well. This is super helpful. If you've created a workflow, but you're not really sure what you called it, then this can be helpful too. We can just be like, all right, I know I made that workflow on the leads module. I'm not looking at all the workflows I have in the system. I'm just looking at the ones built for leads. And then also peep on the right-hand side, you've got that last modified time. This will kind of give you a good clue of, oh, maybe this was the one that I just changed recently. So that's always really helpful. But when we want to create new workflows, you'll come into this area and you're going to click on Create Rule. And when you do this, the very first step is you get to choose the module that you want to build this workflow for. So when you click here, you'll notice all of the core SFA modules that we have in the CRM, and then all of the other related inventory modules, all of those are available, as well as any custom modules you've created, and any linking modules that might have been created from adding lookup field, multi-select lookup fields. So really everything that's in the system in terms of a module that you've added or data that you're housing in the system, all of those should be fair game for your workflow rules. So we're just going to pick one right now. But just so you know, basically when we pick a module to trigger our workflows off of, that doesn't mean that we can't do anything with other modules or other data related to it. And you'll see how once we get into the workflows, there are some spots where we can kind of control data related to other modules. But let's say leads. And then we're just going to give this a name. I'm going to call this something like new lead follow-up. You can name your workflows whatever you want, but I definitely recommend giving it something that at least gives you an idea of what the workflow is for, just because the more workflows that you create, this can get really confusing. Also, utilizing that description field, it's not mandatory, so you don't have to fill it in, but sometimes this can be super helpful. I know I've tried to get into the habit of doing this, especially when we're doing projects for clients. We want to try and use a standard naming convention as much as we can, and then also add a good description that lets you know exactly what the workflow is doing, just so if anybody needs to come in and make changes later, there's no guessing game. So I'm just going to say something like sends email when new lead added, something like that. But if you give it just nice, quick description, that's super helpful for you and then everybody who might be doing some changes moving forward. All right, so when we go to trigger a workflow, we have a few different ways that we can make this happen. And you'll notice that our first option here is our when box. So this is where we're going to set kind of when the workflow needs to happen or when something needs to happen. And you'll notice here we have the options for a record action, date time, record score, and record notes. By far, most popular is going to be that record action option. And this is because this is where we can say the most basic building blocks of what we want. Anytime a record is added into the system, or anytime a record is modified in the system. These are the types of things that usually we want the action of something being added or modified. We want that to trigger something else happening. We want to automate that. So we're going to walk through each of these options and kind of tell you what the pieces are. But one thing that I wanted to note here was, in addition to record action, which, that's the primary driver, those other options that you have, those should get some love too, because those can be very helpful. A date time field value, this would basically let us trigger the workflow whenever a specific date time is met. And so you'll notice when we choose that, we can choose any of the fields that live in our leads module. Anything that's basically a date time field, we can use that as the driver. So we could say on the date of birth, and then we can have this just define and happen one time, or we can make this be something like every year on that date, or every month on that date that's specified. So we can really kind of get this and make it, something custom if we wanted. But you're able to set your date. You're able to define the date if it should happen before or on the time, or if it needs to happen after as well, and then the specific time. So you want to think about things that are really handy for this. A lot of times we do see it utilized for date of birth. You want to do something cute like send out an email, maybe like at the beginning of the birthday month or 2 weeks before their birthday, just giving them a promotion or something like that, like a promo code they can use. But we do see this a lot as well on things like contract renewal. So maybe you have like a contract signing date, and then you want a process in place that a month before that renewal date, you want the team to be engaged so that they can reach out to the customer. Or maybe you want to just automate, send them the email right away that says, hey, your contract is coming up for renewal. You can click on this link to renew, and then that kind of initiates a contract or a sign process. So you have a few different ways that you could do that. But you get an idea of how you could kind of really use this to build out a system that automates alerting you and sending things out when you need to. But like I said, any of our date time fields are going to be actionable for that. We can use those. The record score option and the record notes. Record score, I feel like this is one of those areas that a lot of people never click here because they don't even know what the scoring is. Inside the CRM, there is an entire area of scoring rules. So we can say basically, anytime a lead gets an email, or anytime we send an email and they open it, or anytime we log a call with a customer, things like that, those can all be things that are points that sort of add up and increase the score of that lead. And the idea is that it can help your sales team to kind of prioritize and know who's the most important. But when you configure those scoring rules, those also factor into your workflow rules too. So we can set parameters to say, hey, if that lead score increases or decreases, then I want to trigger a workflow. Or if I have a specific set of scoring rules in place, and if we are following that, and then the score increases or decreases, then you can also configure that to be your trigger. So lots of fun around scoring rules. I don't know if one of our upcoming sessions is going to get into that or not, but it should, because it is super fun. And then that last option you'll have is just for record notes. So this is simply a new thing that we added in just because a lot of people asked for it. There was before no automation touches really around notes. But now you can trigger workflows to be you can set workflows to be triggered whenever a note is added or modified or removed. And so that's just a new little option that you have in here. So we talked about what can be the trigger really for these kickoffs to be happening. And now we want to get into kind of the meat of that and what that really means. So when we're thinking about records being added into the system or modified, and we want those to be the trigger, you have a couple of different ways you can do that. If we just do create, if we say anytime a new lead gets added into the system and we don't need any edit worries at this point, then we could just select this, we could hit next, and we can move into the conditions. The conditions are where we can specify and say, we don't want this to happen to every single lead we add. We only want it to happen to certain leads. And so basically your conditions and your criteria here are going to be where you restrict the workflow, and it doesn't just fire off every single time a record gets added into the system, or in this case, every time a lead gets added in the system. So we can add our criteria. We can say something like, if the billing state is Texas, you'll notice all of your fields that you've added, any custom fields as well as your system fields, those are all going to be fair game for you to include in your criteria here. And then just like when you're creating views and reports and all that good stuff, you'll have your nice and or criteria, and you can also modify those patterns. So just to kind of I wanted to give you an example of how you can add in those conditions. And, if we're just saying a brand new lead gets added in the system, if they are located in Texas, then we could fire off and say what we want to happen next. But let's look back at the trigger options here, just because there's a few other things that you can do. We don't want to just look at things like creating. We can also say, what if we update the field on a record? What if as soon as I update the lead status to left voicemail, I want that to just automate sending out an email to the customer saying, hey, sorry, I missed you. Here's my contact information, and scheduling the follow-up task for me to reach out to them again. We can do things like that with workflows. And this is where in that same kind of area, when we set our trigger, instead of it being on create, you'll also have create or edit or edit. Really, create or edit is helpful for you. Just think about the fact that sometimes when you add a lead into the system, it might meet all of the criteria that you would want to trigger a workflow. And that it may or may not have been an accident, right? You added it in the system and you think when we update the status, that should trigger the workflow. What about a case where somebody creates it and that status is already the right value? Left voicemail isn't a good example of that, but you can see there's lots of cases where we're like, hey, we added in the system and it meets everything. We just want to make sure that it will trigger the workflow. We don't need a second workflow that says, hey, if we edit this, then this should happen too. So it gives you that option for create or edit there. But if we're going to do this specifically for just a field updating, then you can choose that edit option. And then you'll notice here, when we do this, it gives us a way to specify. So we can also say, do we want this to trigger every single time that the workflow is edited? This would mean that every single time that record gets modified in any way, it's going to keep triggering the workflow over and over and over again. So sometimes you want this to happen. Maybe you've got a field that anytime that field is edited, maybe it's like a monetary field. I see this a lot of times on the deals module, the amount field, they'll say anytime that gets modified, period, I want to make sure to get an alert. You can certainly, there are cases where you'll want to do that. But a lot of times it's a first time thing. We want to make sure that just the first time that record gets modified and meets this criteria, then this happens, but we don't need it to be just triggering on and on and on in the background. So keep that in mind whenever you're building out your workflow. If this is something that record's going to get touched a lot and you don't need that to happen, then you'll want to make sure that you don't select this option just so it doesn't repeat and keep firing off all the time. But the cool thing about this is when we do it, this edit option, you'll notice it also gives us a way to say, to get really specific. So we can say, all right, anytime a field gets modified, and then down here, we've got our conditions that are like, if the billing state is Texas and any field gets modified, then it's going to trigger this workflow. You could set something, the way we have this configured here, this would be perfect for that. But we can also get specific and say, hey, only if a specific field is modified. And when I say that, then I can get into the something like that lead status. So if my lead status is modified to, and you'll notice here, I can do any value. So I can just say, as long as that field is touched in some way, I don't care what it gets touched to, I want this to trigger the workflow, then this is perfect for that. We can set that and then we can carry on. But if we want this to happen only when the lead status gets modified to a specific value, then we could do something like this. And that's going to be when the lead status is modified to left voicemail, and then we can carry on. We could keep our criteria here for billing status texts, or like I said, we can add additional criteria or just say everybody. And this means every time the lead status is modified, well, I'm going to say every time. It's only that first time because we don't have this checked off. But when the lead status gets modified to voicemail, then that's going to ensure that that next action happens. Final thing I'll just note here, you also have that option for delete. I have not yet met someone that's needed this. I think that it absolutely makes sense. It's just that this would allow you to say whenever a record gets deleted, then we need to trigger something like an alert or a task or something like that. A lot of times you want to take that delete permission off entirely. Doesn't make sense for everybody to have access and ability to go in and delete stuff. But that option is here so that you have it. All right. So we'll move down here and we'll get into the what can we do now? So we've set our criteria, right? We've said the triggers for when this should happen. And we've talked about how you can add conditions and be based off of any fields that you have on that lead record or whatever record that you're building this from. And now we get into what can we do with this? And so you'll see here when we go into your instant actions, these are the nice little options you have. There used to be like 4 or 5 and we've added to it. So I'm real happy about that. But some of them are pretty simple. Things like field update are just going to allow us to say, hey, update these fields. I think the real value of the field update option is the fact that we can also, this is one of those cool places where we can connect with other modules. So when we're doing this from the leads module, you'll notice when I click here, it gives me a couple of other options. These are modules that I have a lookup field for on my leads record. So basically any record or any lookup field that you have referencing another module that lives on the leads module, that's going to be available here. And then if I do that, I can actually choose fields at that level to update. So on a lead side, this is you don't want to think about this too much. These are definitely custom lookup fields I've added. We all know leads doesn't connect to accounts out of the box. But you think about if this was the deals module, the accounts module, the contacts module, all of those options are going to be available here, as well as, like I said, any lookup fields that you add linking to other modules. And this will allow us to make a connection that says, hey, if a deal stage is updated to closed won, then I want to update the account status to customer. Things like that you can easily create a workflow for. You don't need any coding. We can just use this field update option and make any sort of update like that. So like I said, we're on the lead side right now. We could create that, but something like deals, accounts, those modules are usually the ones where that's really, really handy because you can make quick field updates. We can also do record owner assignment. So everything has to have an ownership. There isn't any sort of unassigned concept in Zoho CRM. But a lot of times we have folks saying, all right, things that come into the system are going to be in like an administrator or a manager's name. And then maybe based on certain criteria, those records would get assigned to the right person and fall into the right buckets. Sometimes that's going to be a territory management situation. Other times that's based on things like how the users are performing in the system or just specific categories of criteria for who they work with. You're able to set that or add that, really factor that into your workflows. So we can, at a given point, if we've triggered a workflow, if maybe a new lead gets added in the system or their status changes and it reaches a certain point and we want to change ownership, then we can do that. We'll also have the option here of transferring ownership of, again, our related modules. So This is bringing up all of our lookups. And I always just like to say deals is the best example here, because if this were the deals module, we'd see accounts, contacts, and all that good stuff. So we can change ownership of an account or a contact based on changes happening in the deal. But anyways, we can set here and we can say select the user based on, and it can either be a specific person. Maybe this is a case of I know anytime certain leads reach a certain point, I want them to go to Mandy, or I want them to go to anybody who's in the CEO role, and just kind of round robin through that. So I'm able to kind of make that selection. You can also do users matching certain conditions. This is only helpful if you are using your user fields, which I've talked to a lot of folks. I even talked to someone today that they were like, where are those user fields at? This is a hidden area, but if you go into your users section where you've got all of your users, if you edit any user, you'll notice you've got these fields like phone number and city and state. These are all user defined fields. You can update those, and then those are accessible for things like workflows and triggers and all kinds of stuff. And then finally, the option is your assignment rules. So if you spent the time building out your assignment rules and you realized that, hey, assignment rules don't apply to records that get manually created in the system. That's something that a lot of people kind of discover, and they're like, I thought that once I built these, just automatically anybody who matched this criteria would get reassigned. No. Assignment rules only work basically on data coming into the system, or if they're tied to something like a workflow. So if you import data in the system, you can say, hey, apply my assignment rules. Or if you've got an API set up and it's triggered to factor in your assignment rules, things like that. But otherwise, you manually create a record unless you've got a workflow set up to know that that criteria should be reassigning it to someone else. When you create it, it's going to be assigned to you. So just something that's good to know if you've done the work and built out those assignment rules, and this would make sense that maybe leads that get updated to a certain value, those should then trigger your assignment rules and just make sure that they assign to the right person, then definitely this is a good way to make sure that happens. And then just make sure at that bottom, you'll note you've got that option to also transfer your related records. So all your good things like your tasks and notes, well, notes for sure would come over, but your tasks and all that good stuff, that comes over and gets changed to the right person. Should clarify there. Notes come over with the record. The owner of the note is still going to be the original person. We want to know who did that. All right. And then we'll just talk through these other options. So tags, you can add and remove tags with workflows. Those are going to be those little cute, colorful things that you might have seen kind of around the system. I was like, why are they black and white? So you can do black and white tags. You can also do color-coded tags. These are great just because if you're not using tags at all, a lot of people aren't because they don't know they're there. You can include tags in your views. And then a lot of people are wanting that nice color-coded, kind of just quick, easy way to see things and have like a flash of something that lets you know this is really important. Color-coded tags are great for that. We could also go on and on about canvas views and all that fun stuff, but quick, simple ways. I love tags. They're perfect. And with workflows, we can say things like, hey, once maybe in this case, we're saying that once that lead status gets left voicemail, we know we want to do things like send out an email, but maybe we also want to just add a tag for unresponsive or something like that. So that's an example of how you can use that. That notify option is really what most people want this for. A lot of times I see workflows that the main thing they want to do is if this triggers, we want to alert somebody to do something or to send an email to the customer or something like that. And so it's used to just say send alert, I think, and now it says notify. And so that can be a little bit confusing. But once you hover over that, you'll notice you have a couple of options. Via email, that's that standard way. But if you are using any sort of messaging platform like Zoho Click, or if you have Teams integrated into the CRM, then you'll notice an option for via, and it's got those other options. So it'd be like via Teams or via Slack, and you can select that so that it sends a channel notification. But when you do via email, then it's going to bring up your email notifications. So everything that you've done in the past, you can, if you've already created those and those are working well, you can look through, you can find the email template that you want, and then you can select that and associate it. Or you could just click on that create email notification and it lets you build out a brand new email template. All right, so I'll go ahead and associate that. because I wanted you to notice that you can associate multiple actions to a workflow. I believe you can do 5 actions per thing, because you think about it like a scheduled action could be another set of 5 actions. So I can do this email. We looked at the notify activities. So if we wanted to schedule a task to follow up with this customer, or if we wanted to create an event or schedule a call automatically, we can also do all 3 of those. The schedule a call option is newer on here. Used to, you could do your task and meeting, and now we've added in that option. So you can also have it automatically create calls too. But when we do that, then same kind of concept with the email. Any tasks that we've created in the past, those are there for us to select, or we can just create a new task for ourselves, and that will be our follow-up. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to click on Add Task, and I'll just create this follow-up one. Just select that and associate. But then also in here, you have option for create record. So this is a newer one that we added in here too. And basically this gives us a way to entirely create a new record in a new module. Before this, you could do this. You could create a custom function, which was you could script it with Deluge code, and then you could make it create your module. Super cool, but now you can do this without needing that developer experience or having to rack your brain to learn Deluge like I've tried to do. You can come in here and you can actually choose your record type. And as soon as you do, you'll notice all of your fields are going to pop up. I say all of your fields, bringing up my basic fields, and then I hit add more fields. And I can just keep doing this if I need to get all of the fields. But all of my mandatory fields will be there. And then I can just basically set the specifics for how I want a record to be created in that new module. All right. And then we'll look at these last couple of options, this webhook and functions. So these are where we get into outside of the Zoho, so more in that developer space. So webhooks will let you connect with third-party websites and outside tools. So if you have a webhook connected or any previous webhooks that you've set up, those would be listed here. Otherwise, same kind of idea when you come into this spot. Then you're able to set your parameters for the URL and the specifics that you need to make that webhook work. So this gets more into the developer side, as does the custom functions. But the one thing I will say with functions is that there is a lot of options available out there. So if you look in the gallery inside the CRM, and if I do that new function, you'll notice here you've got your gallery, and then you've also got everything you've written in the past. So that gallery is really great. There's some good ideas for things you can find in there, but also just the Zoho CRM Help Center, the customers and partners that have shared functions that they've built and written out. They've done some really crazy stuff. There's just tons of resources. Definitely you can learn Deluge and script out your own, but I would say once you get into a spot where you're like, I need to do something that I'm not able to build out directly in here, then we want to get into the functions or the programming side of it, then there's a lot of room that you have for flexibility on that. And I know we're almost wrapped up, but I'll show you this last option because this is probably the newest thing we added in here, is this Actions by Zoho Flow. If you have Zoho Flow, well, even if you don't have Zoho Flow, it actually includes so many triggers of flow that you can use this for. But basically now, you could have used Zoho Flow to build the entire flow if you wanted before, but on the CRM side now, we just have that Actions by Zoho Flow. We can trigger to create whatever we want. And when we do this, you'll notice it's going to pull up all of the applications that are available inside Zoho Flow. So if we wanted, the example I used for this is I wanted to have it create a project in Zoho Projects. Whenever you select the application you're working with, it brings up all of the trigger options. So you can kind of look through here and find what you're wanting. If I say create a project in Zoho Projects, then it's going to let me select my projects connection. And then it kind of lets me build out exactly what I want to happen. So it's really cool. If you use Flow at all, it just brings Flow into the CRM in a really easy way. If you don't, it's a gateway to Flow so that you can kind of see how that application works and see how easy it is to use and bake into the CRM. But cool stuff that you can do with workflows. And I'll go ahead and pause now and let Arun come back on.
All right. Thanks so much, Mandy. Well, we have 1 minute, so let's just see if we can get to one or two of these questions. What happens when with a scheduled action if the condition doesn't match any longer at the time it was scheduled for?
A schedule, so we're saying like we make an update to the workflow later that they no longer, I guess I can answer that now. If you create a workflow and there's a scheduled action, and let's say the record meets the criteria and that scheduled action gets added, if it was something, well, okay, scheduled action, it's no longer going to happen. I guess I should say that. If you created a task and it was due 15 days out, that task is still going to be there. If the scheduled action was create this task 15 days later, when the workflow no longer, or when that record no longer meets that criteria, it kicks it out of that scheduled action. So that 15 days later, you don't have to worry about that action happening because it no longer met that criteria. And you can confirm, I think I'm still sharing my screen. You can confirm that that happens by, if you go into the record in question, when you're looking at the record, you have this nice timeline in here. It'll have upcoming actions and it should disappear. So when it met that criteria, immediately it's going to fall into, you'll see that upcoming action here. When you change it and it no longer meets the criteria for that workflow, that upcoming action will fall off.
Gotcha. Okay, well, I'm just going to ask one more question. This one was asked a couple of times. What is the limit of workflow rules or workflow automations you can create?
It depends on your edition. So I will bring that up now. Zoho CRM is probably the best one. So, and I should say everybody here probably on this call has an account manager. So definitely reach out. They'll schedule a call maybe with me and we can talk about all the fun stuff on your account. But this should give you a good idea based on the edition that you're on. And I believe it's going to be under automation. Oh, it's going to give you your check boxes. But when we go into the advanced ones, it gives us a breakdown on the limits. So it's based on the edition that you have. If you're on Pro Enterprise, and if you're on Zoho One, you're on Enterprise unless you upgraded to Ultimate. But Zoho One users are Enterprise. And that, I believe on those, you have 30 workflows per module. And it's per module. So deals, accounts, contacts, each one, we can do 30. I'm gonna try that. There we go. See if we can get that to come up. And workflow rules. Oh, we have bumped it up, y'all. 125 per module. So
Happy
goodness.
New
And
Year.
we've done it to 10. Yeah, I'm like, wow, it used to be there used to be this. So we've made some big changes on that. So 125 per module. Oh, but it does say a maximum of 75 active at any given time. So that's very important. And then just so y'all know, I told you 5 conditions per rule. It's actually 10 conditions per rule. So that's awesome.
All right, so we're over time, so I'm going to share with you a couple of links that should help. The first link I'm going to put here in the chat. It's to book a call with your account manager. Not everybody has an account manager, but if you fill out the form and you have additional questions, even if you don't have an account manager, we can route you to some support that would help you get answers to your questions. Now, 2 more links real quick. So save that one, bookmark it, open it in a new tab. Second one, real quick, is as soon as this webinar is over, if you could take a moment to fill out this like 5-question survey. And what this does is just helps us come up with the best content that you're most interested in and to help serve you better and improve the webinar experience. And then lastly, if you are interested in attending our annual user conference in Austin, Texas this year, it's in June, but signups and tickets are available now. So I'm going to share with you that link. And this is, like I said, our annual user conference in June coming up. And Mandy's pulling up the page right now. And we'd love for you to join us. So 3 links. First one, level up page to book a call with your account manager. Second one, survey to give us a little feedback and help us serve you better. And last one, the page to register for Zoholics. I will send out a recording of this webinar to you within hopefully 24 hours. max 48 hours. So you'll have this to refer back to. Thank you, Mandy, so much for deep diving into workflows. You'll be back with us in the second week of February with another Skill Up session. Our next webinar is in 2 weeks on Tuesday, I guess it would be the 30th, I believe. And that one's going to be all about how to leverage Zoho Writer in an enterprise setting. Now, it sounds crazy because Zoho Writer is on its surface a word processor, but there's actually a bunch of really cool automations that go way beyond what you can do with Google Docs and Microsoft Word and similar types of applications. So be sure to join us. I will email you a registration link for that one as well, probably next week sometime. So thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Bye, everyone.